Welcome to the I Believe podcast, and a Cure Insight production, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. I'm your host, Danae Peterson, a fellow ocular melanoma survivor. Here on the podcast, we'll be sharing information and insights on treatments, research, and living with ocular melanoma.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle Biosciences tests are designed to provide clinicians precise and personalized tumor information for the benefit of patient care. If you would like more information about how Castle is transforming the treatment of eye cancer, visit castletestinfo.com.
Hey, you guys! Welcome to our first session of the I Believe I Am Mental Health mini webinar, or mini webinar is a good way for it. So first up, we have our 9 a.m. session, Getting Your Passion Back, Turning Your Talents into Healing. Our speakers are Doocy and Wendy Carpenter. So let me just introduce these guys before we bring them on stage. First up, Doocy was previously the host of ESPN's Sidelines and worked at NBC. When Kathy and Steve got married and the kids came along, Kathy retired from her TV work to raise the family and preside as the Doocy family CEO and CFO, and she's enjoyed every single minute of it. Regarding the Happy Cookbook, which you may have seen on Amazon or on the shelf at your local bookstore, the year before we started this project, Kathy was diagnosed with ocular melanoma, an unbelievably rare and aggressive form of eye cancer. She was lucky that they caught it early, and she was treated by Dr. Carol Shields and her team of specialists at the Wills Eye Hospital in Philadelphia. During her first examination, Dr. Shields told Kathy, "I'm going to save your life," and she did. Wendy is a 4-year ocular melanoma survivor. Originally diagnosed with a small tumor in 2018 in December, she was treated with proton beam therapy at Seattle Cancer Care. Unfortunately, her tumor had a mind of its own and decided it wasn't quite done growing. And in August of 2020, Wendy had her eye removed and began her monocular journey. As of January 2023, currently, she remains no evidence of disease. Insert happy dance is what she says. Wendy is passionate about supporting newly diagnosed ocular melanoma patients, connecting with them and helping them find helpful resources as they begin their journey, and encouraging them to prioritize their mental health. Let's bring them on the screen. Welcome, you guys. Hello. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Danae.
How are you guys?
Good.
Nice and bright and early for you, I know. It's nice and bright and early for me, too.
Yes.
And
nice
Kathy,
to see you again.
Yeah, so good to see you. Kathy, where are you from right now? Are you with your daughter right now?
No, I'm in Jupiter, Florida. We're on baby watch. My daughter-in-law is due any day, and my daughter's due in a couple of weeks.
Very fun. So exciting.
Very.
Well, okay, so I was going to have you guys just kind of briefly tell your stories and talk to us about some of the things that you have experienced throughout your diagnosis, and some of the talents or the hobbies that you've had that you've kind of either refused to give up or that you've started as a result of just wanting to face up to some new challenges, So do you guys have a preference as to who goes first?
You go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, thank you. And Danae, is it okay? I put some little pictures on slides, if that's okay.
That's totally fine. If you just pull those up and screen share and say that you're sharing your screen, then Paige in production will be able to pull those up, and she'll cast them up for the rest of the group to see.
Okay, and I think they're up. There we go. I know in the intro, Danae. Hi, everybody. Sorry, let me back up. Hi, I'm Wendy. Danae obviously introduced me. And so I won't go through this, but so my hobby is photography. And I got into photography, probably about 2010, 2011. My dad loved photography, like natural, wildlife photography. And he gave me one of his cameras, and then it just kind of went on from there. But what I want to do is I want to go back to even before my diagnosis really quick, because as I was preparing for this, it really occurred to me, what all started this. So I have a picture of me up there in the very from back in 2017. 2017 is actually when the nevus was discovered in my eye. And at that time, I had been having all kinds of health issues. And I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, severe sleep apnea, and then also an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's. So I just had a lot. I was super unhealthy. At that point, I was 330, about 330 pounds. Very, very unhealthy, both physically and mentally. And one of the last things I did was went and got an eye exam in that time frame, because my coworker was like, "Oh, you're squinting," and I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I have 20/20 vision," which I did still have 20/20 vision. But I went in for that appointment, and that's when they discovered what they thought was a benign nevus. And everyone thought it was benign because it had drusen. It didn't have any leaking fluid. It was pretty flat. So anyway, I was referred and went, and that's where it really started my whole journey. But I say that because I look at that version of myself, and I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to get gastric bypass, which is a weight loss surgery. And I actually had the surgery in February of 2018. And so from that time, from February 2018 to when I was diagnosed in December of 2018, I actually had lost 160 pounds, which is a lot. But also I had spent so much time on my mental health in that time period. And really going into this diagnosis, I was kind of like a new version of me, really just beginning my mental health journey. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. There's just some other pictures of, when I went, like I had the proton beam, and then I love to kind of bring some joy to a really dark situation. And so I found this shirt that said "Walk the Plank" that I wore the day before my enucleation. And then I also wore it to appointments shortly after. So anyway, that is that. I'm going to go ahead and go to my next slide, maybe. So I wanted to get into just a little bit about my hobby. And so these are some photos that I took before my diagnosis. I really focused on just more portrait photography. These are my nephew in the upper left-hand corner, one of my dear friends who has a business. This was like her headshot for her business page. And that is actually one of the last portrait photos that I did. Those photos were taken 3 days before I found out about my recurrence. And that kind of stopped me using I call this my big fancy camera. And just lots of people's kids, families. I loved capturing just natural moments. The picture in the middle of my friend's daughter blowing she was just sitting there, and I just snapped that photo, and it's just one of my favorite all-time photos. The thing that was interesting to me that as I was preparing for this was that I found that I had done some, wildlife photography and sunset photography with my big camera. That wasn't a lot. That wasn't my focus back then. And so that was before my surgery. Once I had enucleation, I quickly learned I couldn't take pictures the way I wanted to anymore. I couldn't see through the viewfinder. It was just it was really, really challenging. And I went through this period of like really deep sadness that I couldn't do that anymore. And so, I still loved photography. I still loved capturing things, but my focus really changed on kind of what I was taking pictures of. I switched over to my iPhone, and then I actually upgraded to one of the higher end iPhones. And I started taking pictures of sunsets, and I loved just the hope that a sunset brings, the beauty, the peace. And so I really found myself taking a lot of photos of sunsets, the ocean. I actually moved to the ocean for 2021. I lived at the Oregon coast, so I was able to go to the ocean and capture sunsets all the time. And so I'm going to switch to my next like view of pictures. So these are all pictures that I took basically in 2021. They're mostly all taken while I was living over at the coast. And as you can see, lots of sunsets, lots of pink, purples, reds, some, lighthouses mixed in there. But I love these photos. They bring me so much joy. And I loved creating them. I actually recently just framed a few that are in my house. I had never framed them before. Um, and from this, I want to just talk to you guys about two photos here that just really, they have like kind of fun stories behind them. So the first one is this picture on the rock. This is Four Brothers. It's an area in Lincoln City, Oregon. Beautiful. If you ever get the opportunity to go there, can't miss it. It's basically four rocks with this one rock has this tree that's just growing out of the side of these rocks. And I'd always loved it driving by, but I got really up close and personal with it. I took my kayak out and went over, pulled my kayak up, got out, and I was taking these photos. I mean, a beautiful sunset. Just, I loved it. And I was like, I hope I'm getting this. I hope I'm capturing this right. And then I turned around and my kayak was gone. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my kayak is. And then I see it had floated off because the tide came in and I wasn't prepared for that. So I jump in the water and I'm running and I'm praying that I'm not going to fall. I was worried my eye was going to fall out while I was running. And yeah, so I got to my boat. Everything was fine. I paddled back to the shore and all was good. And then when I got home and I looked at this photo, I was like, it was so worth it. This is one of my all-time favorite photos. And then the next photo is a photo that I took at another Oregon beach, obviously, called Moolac. And this one was like a really big challenge for me because you had to kind of walk down this really steep, like it was kind of a washed out little trail to get down there. And I made it down and with my walking sticks very carefully because at this point I still was a little uneasy, like only being able to see out of one eye. So I made it down and again, just it was a beautiful sunset. I loved the beach. My word for 2021 was hope. And I decided to write hope in the sand. And then I went back up and shot this image of it. And again, it's just one of my favorite pictures. It speaks to me. It's peaceful. It's, it's beautiful. And I look at it and it brings me hope. So that is my journey up until then. I still had this deep desire to try and get my camera out again. And so as I was on the Oregon coast, really healing, from my journey so far, I decided one day that I was going to pick up my big fancy camera again. And I was going to try it and just see. And my friends were in town. We went on this walk and I'm going to switch to the next slide here. Sorry. Went on this walk and I snapped this photo here. and this, I mean, this is my first photo of that I took with my big fancy camera again. And I remember reaching out to Danae afterwards and like sharing it on my social media. I can't remember, but just I'm like, oh my gosh, I still have it. I love it. Like, and now I have two things because I didn't really use my iPhone before. And now I have both. Um, I didn't use my big camera a lot. I mean, I would use it occasionally, but almost a year ago, I moved to Ridgefield, Washington, and I live right outside of my backyard is basically a wetland, and then I live a couple miles from the Ridgefield Natural Wildlife Reserve. And so I love taking my camera and I drive through. And I just capture, animals, wildlife. That's what I capture more of now than people, and it brings me so much peace and joy doing this. The one photo in the left-hand corner, the owl, that was actually it was a pair of owls, and they were on the tree right outside my balcony last June, and just magnificent animals, so beautiful. So yeah, so this is kind of my journey of bringing me back to photography, like bringing me back to the big camera. Photography never left me, but for me, when I think about my mental health journey, I prior to my diagnosis, I really suffered from depression. But what I learned about myself through my cancer journey is that um, I actually don't have depression as much as I had an undiagnosed anxiety. And when my anxiety isn't treated, then it leads to depression. And so I've really spent the last 4 years learning so much about myself, about what I need to be at peace. I learned that for me, asking with my anxiety, I require a lot of questions. I need to answer a lot of questions, or sorry, I ask a lot of questions. I need a lot of information for my mind to be at peace. So I think that is that. And yeah, I think,
Wendy, this was
yeah.
great.
So, and then just the last slide here was this choose joy. That's kind of my mantra for this journey. This little girl screaming at, come at me. I can take you. So yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening.
No, Wendy, this was marvelous. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing and for talking so openly and vulnerably. I want to honor you for really, well, thank you for honoring us with your courage and your vulnerability, because I know it can be kind of a challenging thing to talk about, and I totally relate as well to the kind of the undiagnosed anxiety. I think I am far less depressed than I am actually just really anxious. And if it gets really bad and I don't manage that anxiety, then it turns into depression, which is obviously not great.
No.
But I did want to ask you before we move
Yeah.
over to Kathy, can you talk to us just like, I guess, tell us a little more, let's connect the dots a little
Yep.
bit. So tell us how focusing on your hobby of photography helped you specifically, to navigate your diagnosis. So what about photography, what about this hobby made it feel so like something you wanted to return to, like something that you always came back to, and that was really serving you in supporting your mental health?
I think it's really grounding for me. It's kind of like I view it as my meditation. Meditation doesn't really work for me. I keep trying it, but my brain just keeps spinning and spinning. And um, the photography really grounds me. Getting out in nature, capturing those images, like looking at the beauty all around me. Really just, yeah, I think it's just really grounding, and it brings me like this sense of peace. It calms the storm in my mind for a few minutes. because how can you not look at a little bunny eating grass and not be happy and think that everything's wonderful, So it just really, it just helps along in that way, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, I think that's great. And I just wanted to help people
Yeah.
kind of connect that
No.
out, that, whatever kind of hobby you have that you either pick up and continue doing after your diagnosis, or something that you start maybe as a result because you're willing to try something new. Whatever it ends up being, there's going to be things about it that are helpful to you. Like I know, like I play piano. And so when I play piano, and I, like, full disclosure, have not played very much recently. But when I do, and the times that I've been really anxious, it's something that helps to bring my anxiety levels down, because it is something that I think changes my state. It changes how I feel. It changes the vibrations that I'm feeling. For me, music is one of those big things. But I think just recognizing that a hobby or something, a passion that you love, it can be healing to make sure that you turn to that, because of how it grounds you. It brings you peace. It helps you to stay calm, or whatever it is. And it can look like really anything for anyone. I think some people, it might be sports, it might be running, it might be walking, maybe hiking. But I love, I think the picture you took, the one that you sent, and I think it was, like you said, I think it was one I saw on social media, and I was like, can I have this in my house?
No, and I never got it to you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's beautiful. But just seeing that, and then now knowing the story behind it, of knowing that this was your very first photo that you took on that large, kind of bigger, fancy camera, it's astounding to me. Like, obviously, like, your gift exists, whether or not you have two eyes or not. Your gift, your talent, it still exists. And I think what a beautiful thing that you've been able to, to recognize that, and to see that evolve over time, and to just kind of gain confidence in your other eye, in being able to still view this and kind of see through the lens, so to speak, and still capture the same beautiful things.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really, that photo is like one of those, I think about Inside Out, the Disney movie, it's like one of those little memory, it's like one of those little memory things.
Yes, a core memory.
That really stands out. One other thing I'll just add, one thing that I started right before my enucleation was stand-up paddleboarding. And I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do that anymore, because being on the water, I do not like to be in the water, but being on the water is so incredibly grounding for me. It's like photography. And so shortly after my enucleation, 3 weeks after my enucleation, was the end of September. And I'm like, can I just try to get on the paddleboard one more time? And my oncologist told me I could do it as long as I was very careful, kept my eyes covered. And so I did. And I'm like, yes, I can still do this.
Well, and I think that's such a powerful thing, to be able to have things that you love,
Mm-hmm.
and to then question. Like, I think we go through this process as patients, like, where we question, okay, am I still going to be able to do the thing that I love? And then, there's this crossroads of, do you challenge that fear and own up to it, or just try it and see how it goes? Or do you not try because the fear of failing is too big?
Yeah.
And I think that's where that crossroads happens for us. And there are some things that maybe we're forced to give up, but there are other things that it's a choice. And I think that there's so much power in personally choosing to keep some of those things that you're passionate about, some of those things that bring you peace, and to find ways around it, even if it takes some practice, even if it takes, realigning your balance, because paddleboarding with one eye is a little bit funky. Like, I mean, I've done that. Like, I know it's a little funky. It feels a little weird, and things are, they're just a little bit different feeling. But it's still possible. And I think just challenging those impossibilities and really finding ways around it can be very, very empowering. And I think when we find things that we can control about our diagnosis, or when we find things that we can improve, that's one of the things that helps us to feel like, okay, I've got this. And that in turn, I think, translates to better mental health.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Well,
agree. Thank you, Danae.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Wendy. And we're going to go ahead and bring Kathy back up on stage so that she can talk a little bit, and then we'll bring Wendy back. And if we have any questions for the two of these guys, then we will go ahead and pose those questions at the end. So, Kathy,
Sounds good.
do you want to briefly tell us a little about your diagnosis story and some of the hobbies and things that you have been a part of or that have been a part of your life?
Let me just start by saying Wendy's photographs are beautiful and her journey is amazing. And I really appreciate her telling her story. But I'm Kathy Doocy. 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago in March, my husband and I went to see our uh, eye doctor just because we needed a new prescription for sunglasses. And after the exam, the doctor said, you've got something. It might be a freckle, it might be a nevus. Come back in a month. And within that, when I went back the next month, it had changed colors and grown. And he sent me to Will's hospital the next day. And I went through a battery of tests, didn't think it was anything. And but at the end of the day, Dr. Shields came in and said, Kathy, you have an ocular melanoma. You need to have plaque surgery. It's your only choice. And I'm going to save your life. And I was shocked. My husband was with me. He was shocked because I had no symptoms at all. And it was about a week later, I got measured for the plaque that they sew on to the tumor in your eye, shut your eye for 5 days. And in that 5 days, my 3 grown children came to stay with us at the Hilton Garden Inn in Philadelphia. And they were watching TV. And because of the radiation, they had to stay like 7 or 10 feet away. And I was thinking while I was laying there that at that point, I didn't know if my cancer had spread, had metastasized. And I was trying to think of what I needed to do to get my affairs in order. And all I kept coming back to was, as soon as I get home, I've got to get my recipes together because everybody's got their favorite thing and they're not really written down. I've got the basics. And so when I came home, I started to get my recipes together and I thought, gee, these are what do I want? What kind of foods do I want? And what kind of recipes? And all I could think of is the foods that make my family happy, my kids happy. And so my husband started to help me and he realized, we might have a book here because everyone has a food that makes them happy. And so that's the first cookbook came about as a distraction and to put the recipes together. And it turned out to be a big hit, a New York Times bestseller. Oh, it's my assistant husband. It became a big hit because it connected with people and a lot of people liked it. And then we wrote another one and then we wrote a third one this last year. And it's kept us busy, kept me busy. I think when you have something to show for it, like Wendy's beautiful pictures at the end of the day, there's something to show for your work and your effort. And I think it was good for my mental health because it was distracting. It distracted away from, I think the hard thing for people that have an issue like ocular melanoma is you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the end game is, and nobody can tell me. No, I asked what's next because from the surgery, from the plaque, I have retinopathy, and I have issues with the eye. I don't have a lot of vision in the cancer eye. I do still have my eye, but I don't have a lot of vision. So, and when I asked the specialist, what's new for me, what's going to happen next month, next year, and they basically just tell me that I should be glad that I'm alive, and I am. But And the other hobby that I had before the melanoma was needlepoint, which is kind of ironic because now it's so hard to see. But during the pandemic, my goal was to make a Christmas stocking for everyone in the family. And I'm almost done. I have 2 more to go. But that's, I can only do a little bit at a time because it's so hard to see, but I can kind of count it out because I've done it for so long. But that's where I'm at, and that'll be something that my kids and their spouses will have forever.
I think that's, I mean, it's another, like, I think there's something to be said. And I think it was Anne in our I Believe mental health, or I Believe seminar in October. She talked about one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves in this diagnosis, whether it's the beginning or in the middle of this, just to kind of help kind of just reorient ourselves, is to do something that I think she called it like a legacy letter or something like that. And it's essentially like picturing, what do you want your life legacy to look like? And I think that while that can be challenging to confront, like the reality, I think just that we all, it's kind of like you said, it's like we have this uncertainty, but also like we all know mortality has an end date. Like we do have an end date, all of us, whether, whatever it's going to look like. And this cancer forces that awareness to be much more narrow focused. And we have a lot more focus on, well, what's going to happen because of this cancer. So this idea of like having a legacy and being able to have something that really immortalizes you in some ways, like a book or like needlepoint or photography. And even if it's not something super tangible, like that you can hold in your hands, just something that you feel passionately about and that you feel connects you with this idea of leaving a legacy. And whether it's because, your legacy is left because as a result of passing away from cancer, or because you just live a full life and you just leave this amazing legacy of the person that you are and the talents that you have. I think that is one of the most empowering things that we can do as patients to, I guess, take this diagnosis by the reins and just really be the ones, in control, so to speak.
That's very true. And while you're speaking, I was thinking that like 10 years ago, I got knocked over by our golden retriever and he broke my kneecap. And I had to have a couple of years worth of surgeries and had to have my knee replaced. But you could see the damage. You could look at it and see it, and I was on crutches and braces and all kinds of things. But you can put your knee up. I had different ice machines. You can ice it. You can do things to make it feel better and know that, in the end it was going to be okay. But with your eye, it never goes away. You can never forget that you have an issue, because unless you close it, that's like the only thing. There's no escaping the fact that you have a visual impairment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that can translate into a lot of struggles in so many different ways. I know many of us many of us have issues with driving, with depth perception. Some of us are a little bit more prone to stumbling because we don't see the curb, and we trip and we miss it. So but I love that, like, I think you kind of alluded to this with the needlepoint, that you've taken some of those visual challenges and you've said, okay, like, I acknowledge that you're a thing, but also I refuse to let that stop me from doing something that I love. And I think that's where kind of our power lies, is to pick and choose what are the things that we're willing to sacrifice as a result of a visual impairment, whether it's because we're monocular or because we struggle with, lessened vision in one eye. And radiation retinopathy, any of the things, the side effects that can happen as a result of plaque or proton beam therapy. But I think that's kind of the tipping point, is what do we give up willingly, and maybe not willingly, but just because we have to for our safety, and what do we keep because we're willing to figure out a way. And I think finding those things that we can figure out a way to hold on to and to keep doing, to keep learning, that can really just provide a distraction. Like you said, it can provide a healthy distraction, but it also leaves a legacy, I think, just in how we handle ourselves and how we approach this life after diagnosis.
Very true. Now I live in fear of a curb, and and the
I live in fear side of the garage. It's okay.
and especially if the cement is all the same color. I'm sure I look like a crazy person trying to figure out the step, but you do what you have to do. And stairs are
Yeah.
not my friend.
I don't think they're anyone's friend, to be honest. Even when I had two working eyes, I still felt like stairs were not my friend. So I guess will you just to kind of, let's again bring this back. Do you feel like, had you not had this epiphany, I guess, during your hospital stay or your hotel stay with brachytherapy, had you not had this thought of, that you wanted to really immortalize your recipes and make sure that you had something that you could leave your children that would remind them of you all the time, and remind them, like you said, of the foods that they loved as they were kids, then what do you think could have been different? Or do you think your diagnosis journey would have looked different from a mental health perspective?
I never would have had the idea to write a cookbook. I mean, my family likes my cooking and my husband's cooking, but it never, if it wasn't for, I guess it was an epiphany that day, I never would have thought to organize my recipes. It never would have occurred to me. So that is a really positive thing that's come out of the diagnosis and the journey, I guess.
No, I think that's one of the things that I have found in talking to lots of different therapists, and I think that our next speaker, Jen, is going to talk a little about this. But one of the things that I think really defines resilience is, for me, resilience is the choice. It's the choice to get back up again. And to me, resilience it's an action, almost like to be resilient. It entails a lot of action on our part, and it means looking at something and choosing to see something different. I think there's a quote somewhere, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm sure, but I've seen it floating around off and on in different groups and on social media, and I love it because it says, sometimes you have to let go of the story you thought you were going to be living and choose to be in the story that you're living now. And I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. I think it's a little bit different than that, but it's this idea that, like, sometimes we have to choose to find the gifts and to find the good despite all of the challenges. And it doesn't mean, and I think we've talked about this maybe on your podcast episode that'll be coming out soon, but it doesn't mean that the challenges don't exist. It doesn't mean that we don't still have vision loss, or that we're not still sad or frustrated, or that we don't still wake up and face the fact that, okay, I only have one eye today. This is what I have to mentally be aware of. These are all the things I have to accommodate. It doesn't change those things. But when we can find the gifts, and when we can find some of the good that has come out of this journey, this process, then I think that it kind of, it changes the perspective. It changes, I'm going to use a photography, I guess, analogy, but it changes how we see through the lens of this diagnosis, because it offers some level of some beauty, or some connection that we wouldn't have otherwise made, or we wouldn't have otherwise had.
That's very true. Very true.
Let's go ahead and, if it's okay, let's go ahead and bring Wendy back on so we can all chat for a minute. Hello again, Wendy.
Hi, Kathy. That was so fantastic. I'm gonna have to check out the cookbook. I've been on a cooking journey myself, so I'd check that out.
Oh, good.
Hello, that was just my alarm.
Like,
No,
no.
no, you're fine. You guys are all good. So, okay, we had a couple questions come in, or at least we have at least one specifically that's come in. One of them is for you, Kathy, and it says, can you tell us about, after you wrote your first cookbook that obviously was, born in the hospital room, so to speak. After you wrote that first one, what inspired you to continue writing more? Because you've now written 3 cookbooks, right?
We have. It got such a great reception, and people just really liked it. and connected with the stories. And it's kind of a memoir with food. And my husband did most of the writing, and he's a funny guy, and people connected with our family stories, and the stories connected with the food, and it just hit a nerve with people. And I think it helped that we weren't professional chefs. We were just like family cooks, and people liked the
Yeah,
food,
just everyday people.
everyday
Oh,
people.
I think that's so cool. That's so fun. And I need to like get a copy of your cookbook, to be honest, so that I can see some of these stories, because I think that that's to me that's the kind of cooking that is the most fun, is when you can read a recipe and also see a little of the story that came with it.
Yes.
Love that. Wendy, out of curiosity, what type of camera do you use?
I use it's a Canon. It's a DLSR. I never say it right. My originally, the camera my dad gave me was a Canon 40D, which is, I mean, it's like middle of the road for an amateur. And then because I loved it so much, he and my stepmom, they actually gave me it. I currently use, it's Canon 60, the number 6 with the letter D at the end, which is the low end. It's the high end of an amateur camera. It's one of the only full frame. And so, yeah, and yeah, that's what I use.
So as you were adjusting to using your other eye, because I think, was it that the eye that was enucleated, was that your dominant
My
eye?
dominant eye, yeah. And
So as you adjusted to using the other eye, were there any like ways of holding the camera, or like did you just have to practice times to get used to it?
no, I think, I tried so many times, not so many. I tried a few times before that great photo, and I just was like, I got so discouraged because I would constantly put it up with my dominant eye, and then I obviously couldn't see. And I couldn't use the viewfinder. A lot of people can shoot without looking through the viewfinder. I can't do it the other way. So yeah. And then that one day I just picked it up, and it's like it just clicked. I mean, it had been almost a year since my enucleation, so I had had a lot of, I'd adjusted to a lot of things already. Because for me, my vision was still 2020, almost 2020 when I had my eye removed. And so I, it just kind of was a big shock. And when you learn that that's your dominant eye.
No, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So both of you guys, do either of you have any new projects that you're looking forward to starting, or I guess that's the first question, is do you have any new projects you're looking forward to starting, or things that you are looking forward to doing?
Grandchildren,
Yes, that's very exciting.
2 on the way. So that's our focus. But one thing that to follow up with the question about the book, uh, I wanted to make sure that we raised awareness about the ocular melanoma. So my husband talks about it in the books, and before the uh, pandemic, we would go on book tours where hundreds of people would show up, and at every event, we encouraged people to get their eyes checked. And because people, if you don't have a symptom and if you don't have an issue with your eyes, you don't think you need to get your eyes checked. And so through the last few years, 2 people have reached out to us that had melanoma, an ocular melanoma, from us encouraging them to get their eyes checked.
That's amazing.
Cool. So cool. And like for me, I actually am looking at getting a new lens. I'm actually going to be renting one to test it out, because out here at the wildlife reserve, there are a lot of birders, people who love to look at birds, and I want to get a 600 millimeter lens so I can zoom in really, really close and capture, some of the wildlife really close and crystal clear. So that's on my list right now. The other thing that I do for my mental health that is outside of photography is I actually love to build Legos.
Really? That's
Yeah,
so cool.
it shuts off. It's the only thing I do that shuts off my brain. Like completely shuts it off. There's no thought. It's just building the next step. I actually wasn't planning to do this, but I just finished with.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
It's the book.
Incredible.
And so it's just one of those things. It's a friend of mine who's a life coach said, find something that feeds your inner child. And that was Legos. So that's the other thing. So I have a whole nother house to build.
That's so cool. Well, thank you for
Great.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, you guys, both of you, this has been fantastic. I just want to thank you again both for honoring us with being here and with sharing your stories and with helping, I think, just draw some connections for hopefully some other patients. And I hope that this can show some of the patients who may be doubting whether or not they can continue some of these hobbies or these passions that they have, just to really reiterate how important it is that we maintain holding on to those things that are the most important. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to say goodbye. But if you guys want to just say farewell, everybody wave. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the I Believe podcast, brought to you by Castle Biosciences. Please be sure to subscribe, and if you're so inclined, send this episode over to friends, family, and share on your social media to help spread awareness around OM. If you have a moment, leave us a brief review or consider making a donation to the links in the show notes to keep our podcast going. Feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter @AcureInsight. We'll see you next time on the I Believe podcast.